Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Hello. This is the first time I've probably, I think, been on this side of the interviewer, which is fun. So thank you for inviting me to do this. And congratulations on the 2 films. I guess to start, I did actually gonna not pretend that I didn't write stuff down. Okay, cool. So I guess, yeah, the first question is to Jaclyn. I was interested in just, obviously, I mean, as short films go, you get like a quick moment to sort of exercise a theme and have like a tone that's like fun to do in that one moment. And for me, I felt there was, although they're very different, the 2 films, there was this similar theme that I found when I watched the 2, that was this sort of forbidden, the forbidden love that happens at the end of the film, the Indigo Valley. And then also this forbidden, this idea that they're behind closed doors and we don't really know what's going on when they're taken away outside of the room. So I was interested to know whether you start with a theme often, or do you start with, like, what's in your process of reading up your stories? Do you start with something like that? Is it something that you're continuing through the body of your work, or do you usually start with actual events and character over a theme?
Yeah. I think I'm interested in females in a sort of isolated environment and like growing up and like breaking out from that and what that means. I think they're different, but they're similar because they both take place in an environment that is quite contained and like unfamiliar to the characters and the women, and I think that was like really interesting to me. I had a like quite conservative upbringing, so I think that for The Last Birthday is pretty like relevant. These girls have these like, they're based on the Romanov sisters, and so they obviously are used to like a very grand life, and they're used to things going like a certain way every day, and then all of that is taken away from them. And the same thing for Isabella and Indigo Valley. So I had made Indigo Valley before, I was working on it, writing it before I did The Last Birthday. So I think a lot of that was like, yeah, the similarity between the overlying like arching theme of women kind of figuring out who they are through isolation, and like wanting to break out and what that means, and like the danger of finding out who you are kind of thing. Yeah, so that answers the question.
And then I guess with that then leads on to the 2 very different landscapes they're set within. Obviously one, you're confined to a space that you almost kind of treat like a stage, and then the other that's, you know, vast, like Iceland is, and that I've never been, but it looks beautiful. And I was just interested to how spatially that affects your story, and how I know it's the same DP that you used in both films. So I was interested to, how you sort of keep that same story and that same theme in 2 very different scenarios, even though in a way I guess they're both unseen, really. I mean, they're up a mountain, they're not seen, and then they're behind these walls. And I was wondering what that physicality of space, how that was different to direct, I think, in terms of your performance with everyone.
I think I really liked for The Last Birthday, even when I was writing it, having the sense that everything took place in like one room instead of like one big house and we go through the different rooms. So I think I had that in mind when I was writing it, so that like informed the story. And then we found this crazy travel location in London and sort of like worked to make it seem like there were walls, but they were invisible and you didn't really know where you are, but like the camera was leading you through this like found space feel. So that was really informed, I think, in the writing process, because I had that in mind. And so like when we found that location, it like, I think it made a lot of sense. And like I don't usually, I'm saying like so many times, I don't usually shoot on Steadicam, but I felt that feel of like the like super smooth kind of like flow and this theatrical thing would really work well in that space. For Indigo Valley, I think it was really informed by the landscape. Obviously, I would want the story to stand alone and like work wherever in some kind of desolate landscape, but I think because Iceland has this sort of like very specific feel to it, that you feel like you're on another place and on another planet, and it's very vast and it's very easy to feel like you're the only person like for hundreds of miles. So that obviously like informed the story, and like I had no idea where we were gonna shoot, like when I was writing it. I'd been to Iceland once, but I think I was like guessing. I was like, I think it looks sort of like this, and like we're gonna shoot here, and like it wasn't until we got there a few days before and like were scouting locations that it sort of placed in my mind. And even now, I still think it could look. I think it could be better, but I mean, it's all like a process of learning what works. But yeah, I mean, they're different because The Last Birthday is obviously all in one space, and in Indigo Valley, you're in like one space. It's all Iceland, but it's all over the country in a way. So, yeah.
How long did it take you to film it?
Like 6 days. But it was very like guerrilla, like it was very guerrilla style. It might have been 7, but yeah.
And then Greta, with that, in terms of it being Steadicam, it being quite theatrical, were there a lot of rehearsals involved for that sort of choreography, I guess? I mean, it feels a bit like a dance with the camera kind of working in and around you, and how was that like, as an actor, your performance within that?
There weren't any rehearsals. It was all just like turn up and let's go. But Jaclyn is very, if you know Jaclyn, she's very direct, and she's almost a bit autistic the way she works. Autistic, but you know, she's very direct and she knows what she likes, and I think that's a great attribute to any director. She's very specific, and it was really refreshing because she gave so many notes before, and usually when you make anything, you don't have that much time or that much money if you're starting out. And so you have to be as direct as possible from the start, and I think, you know, it just shows what you could do in one day. And it's quite interesting working in one space because the story is already quite suffocated, they're trapped in this one building, but then to kind of, I don't know, not to leave that, even show any outdoors or anything, it kind of adds to that, I think. Yeah. Did you have any films in mind when you were kind of getting inspired for that?
Not really, I don't know. I mean, I think like going back to, there were like Russian, but like the Russian Ark, which all takes place in the Winter Palace, and the Beguile kind of all takes place in Winter Palace, but that didn't come out until like when we shot, so. Not really, but I think like going back to that like directing notes and how that kind of happened beforehand, I feel like if you have kind of like what I'm dealing with now, because I always don't know how to direct or what directing means, I think it's like very like open and to interpretation, and it's whatever works for you. But I think a lot of directing happens before the shoot, and like you have, you know, it's like you're writing the script, you're hopefully in contact with your actors, you're like creating your vision, and then when you get on the set, like it just goes. That's like.
And I guess this is a question to both of you. Obviously, Greta, you have made your own films as well. What are the sort of boundaries that you have to sort of work within, you know, according to, you know, low budget filmmaking? But also, I often find there's a kind of freedom to that too, because it forces you to be creative and resourceful in times where, like, otherwise you could have maybe had like any equipment, you know, in the equipment shop. But what ways, I guess, is it sort of given boundaries that you've struggled with, and in what ways has it freed you, I think, to express exactly what you wanted to say?
Okay. I think coming from, I've made films been in like a producer role for films for budgets of like $500 and like budgets for $100,000. So it ranges in between, and I think there's not really much of a difference other than like, yes, like if you have a much bigger budget, you have more resources. But I think for me, that kind of takes away a lot of like the passion behind the project, because like I think if you're making something for nothing, everyone's doing it because they love it and they want to do it. I think there reaches a point, like, you know, in 20, 30 years, I'm not going to be wanting to make films for no money. I'm going to have to, you know, sustain a career. But I think like there is something special about that, and luckily having gone to 2 film schools, I'm in an environment where you can pull on those resources or play that card like we were talking about for a little bit of time. So that's how that works out for me. But.
Well, I've actually had the pleasure of working with both of you guys. I sort of like co-wrote a short film, one of Bonnie's films, and obviously starred in one of Jaclyn's. And I think it's just that thing of having, just the luxury of choosing when you kind of have a low budget. I made my first feature film for 12 grand, which is quite mad. But it was a documentary, and the documentary was about the decline of the British public libraries and how they're kind of been being taken away, and Britain is becoming kind of more of a sort of capitalist bubble of hell. So we basically, I ended up just coaxing everyone into it, from Stephen Fry to Irvin Welsh to John Cooper Clarke. And I think it's this thing, like you said, when you believe in something and the core of the story and the idea or the meaning of it, it's something people believe in, you want to share, people will just work with you. And I don't know, I think the thing with film is that everything is poetry in it, the music, the cinematography, the acting, the costume, and if you can create a utopia which is kind of can take people somewhere else, then I think, that's just magic. I mean, that's a bit of a rant.
I agree. I think there are things that you take risks, when you sort of have less to lose, I guess you take more risks, and often I found in the process of making films is that the worst thing is someone just says no. I mean, like, you ask them to collaborate and you ask them to be in something, and the worst thing they can do is not like it or say no. But I feel most of the time, if it comes from a place where the story is strong and you're passionate, like, you get people on board you didn't think would be interested.
I have a
Question for Bonnie. I saw one of her films in London. Is it Medusa's Tentacles? Yeah. And was that one of your first short films?
No, that's my latest, I guess.
Latest short. What was like the turning point for you, suddenly going from acting and having kind of such like a powerful position to suddenly deciding that actually you wanted to make that film, and how did that even come about, like that story? Because it's such a sort of, like, because you can't really just, I don't know, stories are so random, like, where did that start?
I guess specifically to that film, the story, that was actually my first film that I directed that wasn't my original story, so everything else I've written and directed. I mean, I wrote it, but it was an adaptation of a short story by an author that I really admire called A.S. Byatt. And again, that was one of those moments where I just like asked her to get the rights, and I honestly didn't think she was going to say yes, but I was like, may as well, and I did, and I was kind of surprised really that I did. And then in terms of transition, I guess I was always just more curious beyond the job that I had. I was always interested in what was happening behind the camera. I asked so many questions, probably infuriatingly so to many people, but I would be just like, what's this, what's that? I couldn't quite rest with just my position as an actor. And I went to film school, and I just continued to do and learn by making things. And I can see that you both have done the exact same thing, I think. Often you just have to like work through the process of making stuff by doing it. I think we, in a town where there can be a lot of talk and there's a lot of, the facilitators of the work, and I think it happens to be like, you just have to make it and go do it, and you learn through that process. And I think that's, similar to, I think Indigo Valley, they're just stumbling through these things that they're coming to understand. Obviously in this scenario, quite devastatingly so, in kind of the darkness that ends up unfolding. I guess leads me on to my next question in terms of this transition. Why, I guess, did you decide to act in Indigo Valley, and is this going to be something that you continue to do? I know that obviously this is going to become a feature film, and it's your kind of aim to continue to be in it, and what's that like? I think it's really admirable to be able to direct yourself, and so I'm just interested in what that's like, really.
Well, I guess I like to say that like I started out as an actor, whatever, but like you started out as an actor as well. So I think I was when I was 8, I was never like in plays until I was 8, and I produced and directed and like wrote a version of Annie, and I was also Annie in my backyard. So I think that sort of started the like multi-hyphenate like interest thing, but because there weren't like, you know, you're 8 years old, you're not just gonna like go direct a movie. Like I just got involved in acting and community theater because that was the easiest like outlet for me, and then it's gone through a lot of phases. Like it was like musical theater for a really long time, and I really wanted to be on Broadway, and then it kind of shifted to just acting, and then I had like a period where I didn't really know what I wanted to do and did fashion stuff, and that's how we met actually. And then I was in a play, and I directed certain parts of it, and I was like just really interested in that, so I decided to write a film, and I was in it. I had a small part, but I was interested in, and that's what I did. I started writing and producing and having like a smallish role in the films, and then I didn't like the way they would turn out. So I would be like, why didn't I just direct it? And I think, they were obviously like great experience and like really, really helpful learning experiences. And like when you're starting out, and I'm glad I didn't direct them because I don't think I had the confidence or the experience to do it. And I was like, I'm just gonna be in it. And that was the film I did in London 2 years ago that I applied to AFI with. And then, yeah, I just started directing with a group of people that I met at the LFS. I wasn't in really anything else I did that year, but I was in other people's stuff. And then when I went to AFI, I just directed for a year because like you're not really allowed to do anything else. And then as I was writing Indigo Valley and like thinking about it, I wasn't originally going to be in it. And then my producer and my DP just kind of saw me in the role, and like I didn't really have anyone specific in mind, so I was like, I feel connected to it, I think I can do it, and I'm really glad that I did because I think it opened up something in me that I hadn't experienced before in terms of just like feeling that I really wanted to act and trying to figure out a way to do that both in my own stuff and in just having my own acting career, I guess. But yeah, I don't really like differentiate. It's hard because it's like when you're pitching yourself as a director, you don't want to say you like one thing more than the other. And I'm sure you've experienced that too, but yeah, so.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a difficult balance. I think you know which rooms to walk into and be very direct and clear as to what you're kind of presenting. And I think at the end of the day, though, I think as any creative or any artist, it's all informing each other. Like it would be silly to kind of compartmentalize each.
Oh wait, can I follow up? Because she asked me what it was like to act and direct, and I didn't answer that question. But I think in this circumstance, it made sense. It doesn't make sense for everything I do, I had a DP that had worked with me in a similar way, and an AD that had too. And I think if you have those two positions that understand that, and then all the actors are okay with it, and like they get you, then it's just like it's easy because you're giving the director what you want. But it is like scary because you're like, are people going to think that I have like a huge ego because I'm putting myself in 4 roles? But for me, it's just sort of like what I grew up doing, so it doesn't feel that way.
I feel like knowing Jaclyn.
When I first met Jaclyn, we met in New York, and she lived in this apartment in 55th and 5th, and opposite this restaurant called Circo, and she was obsessed with Woody Allen, and she used to pay the concierge guy money to text her when Woody Allen would come into the restaurant. And I honestly think that's where you get the sort of like actress director thing. She's obsessed, and I think you have the similar thing.
Woody Allen is a controversial figure right now. I do admire, like, yeah, he's in his films and movies. That's just what he does, and like people accept him for being bad, and you know.
And I think it's kind of great
Because I think lots of women haven't necessarily taken that role, and it's kind of, for me, I think he's my closest example of somebody who's done it well, and kind of.
There's Lena Dunham. I think. I don't know. I think yes, like Woody Allen is a big inspiration. He's obviously, Clint Eastwood. I mean, there's huge like Hollywood men that do it, and I think there is less women, but that doesn't mean that there are women doing it, and there should be more. But I think people are scared. But I know I have a few other friends or colleagues that have directed and acted recently. So yeah, I think it's something we'll see more of, hopefully.
Yeah, we're seeing it tonight. That leads me on to open it up to you all. If anyone has a burning question or a burning question they'd like to answer. Yeah.
I'm curious how much you collaborated with the composers on the scores, because I remember really noticing them, and so I was curious like what that process was like.
Okay, so I'll go through Indigo Valley and then I'll talk about Last Birthday because you're the composer here as well. For Indigo Valley, I worked with two different composers. So there's a composer for the whole like film, and then there's a composer that did the end song. And I was really probably super specific with the score because I also having this like music or musical theater background, I think that's like an important aspect. I mean, for every filmmaker it is, but and you know, like so there were several iterations, especially for Indigo Valley, where it sounded too sci-fi or like there were too many different kinds of music in it, and I just sort of honed in on like the kind of mysterious ambient, like top of the lake-esque feel. And working with Dalal, I think she emailed me from how did you find me, Dalal?
I don't know, I think it was like a shorts in production thing.
Yeah. And I usually don't respond to like random emails, but something about her email just like struck me, and that she was a woman composer. And I was like, cool, I'll check her out. And like, I just immediately like responded to her like thoughts on the story, and I don't think the film was done or edited or whatever, but we just started talking about it, and then I sent it over to her, and she went through the script, and then went through the film and worked with like a group of musicians to kind of create it, and I was pretty involved. So yeah, I just think it's about, if you know, it's like you're obviously trusting the people you quote unquote hire to work or collaborate with, and then you're just kind of giving them notes and guiding them and just making sure that everyone is working to create the sound of the film.
Anyone else?
I'm a little curious because obviously some of you all worked really in London and that sort of film community are here now. Are there differences in what it's like to do that there versus here?
I'm kind of still based in London, but I actually think that's a really interesting question, because I feel like I'm in the process of making my second feature film, which is a fiction film, and spent 2 years writing it, and found the producer who I'm working with, and it's now we're like attaching people, and we're hoping to shoot in the summer. But I find it really hard being in LA, because I feel that it's a city which is so closely connected to film, but I always feel quite like a stranger to the city, and I feel like everything I write about is about sort of like smaller experiences which happen to me from the city I'm from. So I can't imagine trying to make stuff here. I think I'd find it really hard. How do you feel?
I think it's about the people. I don't think it's necessarily about the place, and that's something that I've realized probably in the past week. Because I was super headstrong about something to do with a film that I'm working on and a location, and then it kind of dawned on me that as long as you have the right people, you can make the film anywhere. In terms of just like LA versus London, I think London has a much like kind of open artistic tradition, and it's like Shakespeare, and it has all of this amazing literary and theater history, and like there's great British film and great British, independent film as well. And I don't feel it's as commercial driven. And sometimes I feel like in London there's just more people willing to do it because they want to do it, and there's no like financial or commercial gain. because LA is just an industry town, but yeah, funny. I think you've lived here the longest.
Well, I was going to quickly say, I remember I met the director who directed Quadrophenia, and he said he made that obviously cult hit movie, and everybody loved it. It was like a hit of its time, and it was his first feature film, I think. And then he moved to LA because he was suddenly like a big shot, and everybody wanted to work with him because he created this cult movie. And then he moved here, and he spent 15 years trying to make a movie like that movie, and of course that's about Brighton, it's about the mods. You know, you can only really make that movie about the place that you're from. So I said, oh well, what do you do? How do you like survive and make your money? And he was like, well actually, I invented MasterChef. So that is something to consider.
What about you, Bonnie?
I need to dream up my hit TV show. I think it's interesting. I mean, I've worked, obviously I'm from London, I went to film school in London. When I graduated from film school, I pretty much just always used the crew that I worked with and graduated with. You know, you suddenly graduated and you were in this amazing, supportive group of contemporaries that can just be there for each other and make films. And then I moved to New York, and the first short film I shot in New York was terrifying because I was totally in the dark. I was working with my lead actor was someone that I'd worked with before as both of us being actors in something. But I was like totally in the dark, and I relied on asking other friends I had in New York who were filmmakers to recommend me crew, and but it taught me a lot about directing really, because I think I had been resting on the fact that I had these very close relationships with the crew I was working with in London, that I almost didn't need to like step up and deliver what I had to deliver almost as a director. So I prepared like so much and was so terrified that I actually stepped into that role a lot more, I think, because of that film. And then here, I think city to city, it's also a question of culture. It's like, what are you surrounding yourself with that inspires you? I think when I'm in London and New York, I'm looking at everything but film. I don't really watch movies when I'm at home. I just go and see art and theatre, and here I just watch movies all the time, which is, I don't know if that's really good to watch films and try and make them. But I also think here there's space which is very reflective of my work. There's like physically we have a lot of space. There are endless landscapes you can travel to here, and I think I've taken that upon myself to like add like an adventure quality to that filmmaking, and like going to strange places to be inspired to make films, like you obviously did with Iceland as well.
Also, I feel like everyone looks better here in film than in the UK.
The light is so much better. I mean, like for vanity's sake, you should just, if you're going to act in them and direct them, you should just make them here. Forget London, forget England. It's just grey.
And do we have any more questions?
Yes. So what would be your advice for like a first time filmmaker? Like I come from animation and I want to get more into film. Like I've already done a short little film, but like what would be your big advice that you would give?
Well, you go first.
Okay. Do it. First of all, definitely do it. I think you can honestly only learn from physically doing something, however terrifying that may feel. And know that everyone was in that same position as you. And just work with people that you feel sort of safe with, but also challenge you. I don't think you want to work with people who kind of say yes to everything that you're saying, because you want people to kind of question you and push your ideas. So there's like a bit of conflict. I think like drama and action needs some conflict, and I think that's the same as when you're in your crew. I think you need a bit of like, need to challenge each other, and yeah, just be super resourceful, which I'm sure you are with, I think we can make films now so easily and so cheaply, and I wouldn't get tied up on like production value, because like whatever, if it's a good story, it's a good story, and just I think the simplest story is often the truest, so yeah, good luck.
I don't know, that was really eloquent. I don't know. I think it's like similar advice to Bonnie, but I also think something that I've realized is that for every no, there's a yes, and you can get really headstrong about like one thing or like one person or one but there's always gonna be like another option that might be better than like what you had originally thought that the whole thing was gonna be based around. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And just being really open. I just said two very contradicting things. Yeah.
I just think independence is key. So I think don't worry about anything, but just doing it. And honestly, if you just make something, you will create a community around it. And I think that's what will drive your vision to the future. And that it's just always that community of people. When you're lying in the bath at night worrying about stuff, those people will be the ones to drag you through it. And that's what you're making it for. And on it, I know it sounds mad, but it's true. Everybody's vulnerable.
Cool. Any last questions or? Wait, vulnerable?
Vulnerable?
Yeah, I thought you said bumbable.
Vulnerable. Yeah, it is a good word. That's smart. One more question, anyone? Yes?
Where do you mostly get your ideas from? Are they do they come from visions, ideas, experiences, dreams? Like what? Well, all three of you, it'd be nice to.
I think that's often like the hardest question. I think it's like accumulation. That sounds like boring, but I think things accumulate subconsciously around certain ideas and themes and messages. I often don't think of. I think that's changing as I kind of go into kind of a feature world in the sense that it's like essentially it has to have events that take place and there has to be like a strong narrative, whereas short film is I found very much like character, sensory kind of theme message. So I found that a very comfortable world for myself because I just had a theme or a message that I wanted to push and I found kind of characters that would best push it for that narrative. And now I'm like on the other end of that spectrum and ideas come very differently in a kind of almost like narrative way. But I think I'm always going to be someone who accumulates a kind of feeling that I'm trying to emulate or like a question I'm trying to push. That sounds really vague, but.
I'm really interested in like moral boundaries and what that means and sort of how that comes out in our daily lives and our relationships. That I think again goes back to where I'm from and how I was raised, being very sheltered. But I also, I think like Indigo Valley, yeah, it's much more character-driven personally probably in both of those women, but then I think The Last Birthday was something that I just wanted to explore, like try. And I think that's also what's like great about doing shorts and stuff is that you can just try out things because there's not as much at stake, say through a short to a feature.
I think my inspiration comes from just things which annoy me and just like just the struggle of life. The film which I've been writing for 2 years is about, I'm also a poet, it's about a struggling poet who is just trying to like have her first book published and she's a single mother and she's just nothing works out for her. But I think it just comes from that sort of uncomfortable state of being which we're always in the whole time. And I don't know, I made a film called Myths Not For Sale a year ago and it was a really strange film. But it was about sort of like a housewife who was just really frustrated and I don't know, maybe it came from my own mother. I'm one of 5 and she sort of stayed at home forever. And I think it just comes from that really normal place of just reality.
Okay, yeah, well.
Cool, well, I think that finishes us up. So thank you for coming and thank you for the discussion.